My name is Olivia Thompson, and I was 33 years old when I discovered that the man I was about to marry had already planned our divorce. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives as a notification preview on a locked screen. A single sentence. A quiet detonation. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 4 weeks before my wedding. Daniel Carter was supposed to be the final, flawless component in the system of my life. I design and install custom home theaters and smart home systems for a living. Clean wiring, perfect calibration, everything in balance. If something doesn't function the way it's supposed to, I trace the fault and remove it. Daniel was never supposed to be the fault. His parents, Richard and Eleanor Carter, were funding our wedding. 6 figures of imported flowers, a historic estate venue, a string quartet flown in from New York. To them, this wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement, a merger. Their only son stepping into a curated future. They treated me kindly, proud of my business, proud I built everything from nothing. Daniel adored the spotlight, the tux fittings, the tastings, the attention. I told myself it balanced my quieter nature. I was marrying him, not the spectacle. Months earlier, Daniel's best woman, Sophie Bennett, created a group chat called Groom's Inner Circle, planning bachelor parties, coordinating surprises. Apparently, Sophie mistyped a number. Instead of adding one of Daniel's college friends, she added me. My number was 1 digit off. For months, I existed there like a ghost, muted, ignored, unseen, until that Tuesday. The notification preview appeared before I could stop it. Daniel, she wants the ridiculously expensive honeymoon. I'll say yes for now, but everyone knows I'll leave her eventually. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. Eventually? Leave her? I unlocked my phone, opened the chat, scrolled, and that's when I saw the real Daniel. Are you sure you're going through with this? One friend asked. Relax, Daniel replied. It's stable, she's reliable, it's a good starter marriage. Starter. Marriage. I kept scrolling. I'll give it a few years. Let her expand the business more. Once the house is in both our names, I'm set. Another message. She worships you, man. Easy life. He responded with a laughing emoji. And then, the divorce settlement will be the real honeymoon. I didn't feel rage. Rage would have meant I was still emotionally inside it. What I felt was clarity. The kind surgeons must feel when they recognize a tumor. The diagnosis is ugly, but the solution is obvious. I scrolled back down to his most recent message about the honeymoon. His friends were already replying with fire emojis and crude jokes. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I typed the only sentence that mattered. Make eventually today. The chat froze. I took screenshots, every page, every plan, every calculated laugh. I opened my email. To Richard Carter. CC Eleanor Carter. Subject line, a change of plans. I attached the evidence, and I hit send. Then I began to pack. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. 5 minutes. Nothing. Then, Sophie, who is this? Another friend. Is that Olivia's number? Daniel, Olivia? What are you talking about? My phone began to ring. Daniel. Again. I let it ring. Then an email appeared. From Richard. 1 word. Unacceptable. Seconds later, my phone rang again. This time it was him. I answered. His voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. Olivia, please tell me this is fabricated. I was added to the group months ago, I said calmly. I never looked at it, until tonight. Silence. In the background, I could hear Eleanor's voice. Sharp. Distressed. We're coming over, Richard said. He hung up. Daniel's text flooded in. It was a joke. Guy talk. Sophie exaggerated. Please answer me. Baby, I love you. Love. That word had never felt so hollow. 20 minutes later, Richard stood in our apartment doorway. He looked 10 years older. Boxes already surrounded me. He looked at them. Then at me. I've canceled the wedding planner, he said quietly. We'll lose deposits. I don't care. I will not finance fraud. Fraud. He used the right word. He asked if I would come to their house. There would be a conversation. A reckoning. I agreed. As we drove, Daniel continued texting, now blaming Sophie, claiming his phone had been taken. Desperation makes liars sloppy. When we entered the Carter estate, the air felt heavy. Daniel sat on the sofa, pale, sweating. Eleanor stood near the fireplace, cold fury radiating off her like heat from steel. Sophie was there too, summoned. Daniel stood when he saw me. Liv, thank God. Tell them this is out of context. I didn't look at him. Richard held printed screenshots in his hand. Evidence. Daniel, Richard said, voice echoing through the room. Did you write these messages? Daniel swallowed. We were joking. That wasn't the question. A beat. Yes. And do you love her? Silence. That silence answered everything. Eleanor spoke next. Pack a bag. Daniel stared at her. You have humiliated this family, she continued, and this woman. He began to cry. And for the first time all night, I felt something. Not pain, not anger, relief. The tumor had been identified, and I had cut clean. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a confession. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a verdict. Daniel stood there, hands trembling at his sides, blinking like his eyes had forgotten how to be human. Behind him, Sophie shifted her weight from foot to foot, suddenly very interested in the marble pattern on the floor. Eleanor Carter didn't move. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a vase. She didn't beg for explanations. She simply looked at her son the way someone looks at a stranger who wandered into the wrong house wearing the right face. Pack a bag, she said again, slower this time. Tonight. Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Mom, you can't be serious. This is being blown out of proportion. I watched him, and what hit me wasn't heartbreak. It was disgust. Because even now, caught, exposed, stripped down to the bones of his own words, he still believed the world could be negotiated back into his favor. Richard held the stack of printed screenshots in one hand. The paper looked absurdly thin for something so heavy. Out of proportion, Richard repeated, voice low. You called your marriage a starter. You said you'd stay until the house was in both your names. You joked about the divorce settlement being your honeymoon. Daniel's eyes flicked toward me, a silent plea. Help me. As if I was still his partner in performance. I said nothing. Eleanor stepped closer, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Do you have any idea, she asked, what you've done to her? Daniel swallowed hard. I didn't mean it like that. The words were automatic, reflexive, the kind people use when they've been caught cheating on a test they've been failing for years. You meant it, Eleanor said. You wrote it, you laughed about it, and you expected her to marry you anyway. Sophie finally spoke, voice too bright. Mrs. Carter, I swear, it started as, banter. The guys... Eleanor turned her head so slowly it made Sophie freeze mid-sentence. Do not, Eleanor said, confuse your cowardice with humor. Sophie's face drained. Richard looked at me then, not as his son's fiancé, not as a woman standing in the ruins of a wedding. As a person. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know. I nodded once. That was all I could give him. Daniel's breathing turned ragged. Dad, come on. You know I love Olivia. This was just stupid talk. I was venting. Everyone says things. That's your defense? Richard asked. That everyone is rotten, so you should be forgiven for being rotten too? Daniel flinched. He tried again, voice cracking. I'm under pressure. This wedding, your expectations, her business, everything is... It's a lot. And there it was. The pivot. The blame. Not responsibility, just redirection. I felt my stomach tighten, but my voice stayed calm when I finally spoke. Daniel, I said, and the sound of his name felt like ash on my tongue. You weren't under pressure. You were making plans. His eyes widened. Olivia, please. Oh. You didn't say you were scared, I continued. You said you were going to use me. Those are different things. Eleanor inhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time and only now remembered she could breathe again. Richard's jaw worked, as if he was chewing down fury. Daniel's face twisted, and suddenly the tears shifted into anger. You're acting like I'm some villain, he snapped, voice rising. Like you didn't benefit from this wedding too. My parents' money, the connections. The moment those words left his mouth, the air changed. Eleanor's eyes went dead. Richard's hand tightened around the papers so hard the edges bent, and I felt something inside me settle. Not grief, finality. Eleanor pointed toward the front door. Out, she said. Daniel laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You're kicking me out? For a few texts? For what those texts reveal, Richard said, stepping forward. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You're not being punished for words. You're being removed for character. Daniel looked at them like they'd lost their minds. Then he turned to me again. Tell them this is insane. Tell them to calm down. I met his gaze steady. No, I said. It came out softer than I expected. Not triumphant, not cruel. Just honest. Daniel's mouth fell open. Eleanor's voice softened for the first time, but it wasn't kinder. It was colder. Worse. Pack a bag, she repeated. You can stay at a hotel. You can stay with Sophie. You can sleep in your car. I don't care. But you are not staying here tonight. Daniel's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of consequence finally pressed into him. He turned, grabbing at any remaining thread of control. Sophie again. You said you wouldn't let this happen. Sophie's eyes darted. Daniel, Shut up, Eleanor snapped. Sophie went silent like a chastised child. Richard gestured toward a side hallway. There's a guest room upstairs you can use to pack. You have 30 minutes. Daniel stared at him. 30 minutes? Like I'm some criminal being escorted out? You are, Richard said flatly, in this house. Daniel stumbled backward, face crumpling. He started toward the stairs, then spun around suddenly. Olivia, please, he said. Don't do this. We can fix it. We can still... I cut him off. There's nothing to fix, I said. There's only what I finally saw. He looked like he was going to lunge toward me, like anger might physically move him closer. But Richard stepped between us. Go, he ordered. Daniel went. The next 30 minutes felt unreal, like we were all actors forced to watch the final scene of a play we didn't agree to star in. Eleanor sat in a chair like a judge waiting for the prisoner to return. Richard paced, phone in hand, already making calls. Vendors. Planner. Venue. I stood near the window, looking out at the Carter family's manicured garden, the perfect landscape designed to hide any rot beneath. And I thought, even the prettiest lawns can cover graves. Sophie shifted nervously near the doorway, clutching her purse. Olivia, she whispered finally, I'm really sorry. I turned to her slowly. What part are you sorry about? I asked. Her lips parted. No words came out. Because she didn't know. Because she wasn't sorry about the betrayal. She was sorry she got caught standing next to it. Richard's phone buzzed again. He glanced down, then looked up at me. Eleanor wants to send an email, he said. To the guest list. My breath caught. Tonight? Eleanor didn't even look at me. Tomorrow morning, she said, before the rumors are controlled by anyone else. Controlled. That was the Carter instinct. Manage the narrative before it manages you. But then Eleanor added something I didn't expect. And it will include an apology to you, publicly. Sophie's head snapped up. Mrs. Carter. Eleanor silenced her with a look. Olivia did nothing wrong, Eleanor said, and she will not be the one whispered about at country clubs because my son decided to be opportunistic. Richard's voice roughened. We will not protect him from the consequences of who he chose to be. A sound came from upstairs. Footsteps. Fast. Then Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, carrying a duffel bag like it weighed 100 pounds. His eyes were red, his face swollen, but his chin was lifted with the last scraps of pride. He walked down, stopping in front of his mother. Eleanor looked up at him. Give me your key, she said. Daniel blinked. What? Your house key, she repeated. Now. He stared at her as if he'd misheard. Mom, seriously. Richard's hand extended. Daniel. Slowly, like giving away oxygen, Daniel reached into his pocket and dropped the key into his father's palm. The small metallic sound echoed in the room. A single click, like a lock closing forever. Daniel's eyes turned to me one more time. I loved you, he whispered. I didn't correct him. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him love doesn't look like a contract you plan to break. I just said the truth that mattered. You loved what I could do for you, I replied. His face twisted, and for a second I saw the real emotion beneath the performance. Shame. Raw and ugly. Then it disappeared again behind bitterness. He backed toward the door. Eleanor didn't stand. She didn't hug him. She didn't say goodbye. She said one last sentence, quiet and lethal. You are not welcome here until you become someone worth welcoming. Daniel flinched as if slapped. Then he turned and walked out. The front door closed behind him with a soft final sound. And that was when Eleanor, the woman who had been carved from ice for the past hour, finally let her composure crack. She pressed her fingers to her lips. Her eyes glistened, and she whispered, as if speaking to herself, How did we raise him wrong? Richard looked at me, his expression full of something I couldn't name. Regret, grief, respect, maybe all of it. We'll make this right, he said. I almost laughed. Because there are some things you can't make right. You can only stop making them worse. And in that moment, I realized the explosion wasn't over. It was just beginning. The explosion didn't end when Daniel walked out that door. It multiplied. By morning, Richard and Eleanor had already drafted the email. It was formal, controlled, precise. It is with deep regret that we announce the cancellation of the wedding between our son, Daniel Carter, and Olivia Thompson. This decision follows the discovery of a profound breach of trust on Daniel's part. We extend our sincerest apologies to Olivia, who conducted herself with dignity and honesty throughout this matter. They didn't hide behind vague phrasing. They didn't say mutual decision. They didn't protect him. They chose integrity over image. And in their world, that cost something. By noon, the calls started. Friends, business associates, extended family. Speculation travels faster than facts. But this time, the facts arrived first. Daniel texted me once that morning. You didn't have to let them do that. I stared at the message. No apology. No ownership. Just outrage at exposure. I didn't respond. The financial damage was immediate. Richard went through every contract with a team of lawyers. Some deposits were salvageable, others were lost. The caterer kept their fee. The imported orchids were already en route. The venue charged a cancellation penalty that could have paid for a small house. Richard paid it without blinking. But the real cost wasn't financial. It was reputation. And in their circle, reputation was currency. Then there was the apartment. The lease had both our names on it. I'd moved in a year ago, built shelving in the study, installed custom lighting in the kitchen, designed it carefully. It had been ours. Now it felt contaminated. I moved the rest of my things out within 48 hours. Daniel wasn't there the first time I returned. The second time he was. Suitcase half packed. Dishes still in the sink. His face looked worse than it had at his parents' house. Puffy, sleepless, humiliated. The moment he saw me, he snapped. "You're proud of this?" he demanded. "You destroyed my relationship with my parents." I set a box down slowly. "No," I said, "you did." He laughed harshly. "You could have handled it privately." "Like you handled our marriage privately?" I asked. His jaw clenched. "Everyone says stupid things." "You made plans," I corrected. He stepped closer, voice lowering. "I was scared." That word again. Scared. But fear doesn't explain strategy. Fear doesn't draft exit plans. "Then you should have talked to me," I said. "Not your audience." Silence stretched between us. For a second, I almost saw regret, but it dissolved into resentment. "You think you're perfect," he said bitterly. "Miss Self-Made, Miss Stable. You were suffocating me." There it was. Blame. Because it's easier to accuse someone of suffocation than admit you were plotting escape. I walked into the kitchen without responding. From a bag I had brought with me, I pulled out a can of black spray paint. Daniel stared. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I walked to the living room wall, and I painted a single large X across it. He lunged forward. "Are you insane?" I moved to the next wall. Another X, then another. Then, on the largest wall, the one we once planned to mount our wedding portrait on, I wrote the words that had started everything. "It's just for now." The letters were bold, black, unapologetic. Daniel looked like he might explode. "You're vandalizing the apartment." "Yes," I said calmly, "and I won't contest the deposit." He stared at the words on the wall. I watched his expression shift. Recognition. Shame. Rage. "You're punishing me." "No," I said, turning toward the door. "I'm leaving." I called the landlord that afternoon, explained the breakup, told him I wouldn't dispute the forfeiture of the security deposit, gave him Daniel's number as sole contact moving forward. I was done subsidizing someone else's exit strategy. Daniel moved in with Sophie temporarily. That arrangement lasted 3 weeks. Apparently, when the wedding spectacle disappeared, so did their loyalty. Without the parties, the fittings, the drama, they had nothing binding them. Sophie stopped answering his calls after that. He called me once late at night, drunk. "You ruined everything," he slurred. "No," I replied quietly. "I revealed everything." He hung up. The social fallout was brutal. People whispered, not about me, about him. The phrase starter marriage circulated like wildfire. Business partners of Richard distanced themselves from Daniel professionally. His father didn't cut him off financially, but he did something worse. He withdrew endorsement. And in their world, that mattered more. Daniel had to get a job. A real one. Not consulting through family connections. Not coasting on introductions. He started working in sales for a mid-tier logistics company. No assistant. No prestige. Just commission and pressure. I heard this through Richard months later. Not gossip. Just fact. "He's learning," Richard said quietly during one of our dinners. Yes, we still had dinner occasionally. It surprised even me. But something fragile and unexpected had formed between us. Not obligation. Not pity. Respect. Eleanor once said softly over tea, "You handled this with more grace than we deserved." I told her the truth. I handled it because I had to. Meanwhile, my life expanded. I bought a house. Not massive. Not showy. But solid. With a workshop in the back where I could build furniture on weekends. I invested the honeymoon savings into expanding my business. Hired 2 new technicians. Launched a commercial installation division. Stability doesn't have to be boring. It can be powerful. Nearly a year after everything collapsed, Richard called me. "We're selling the house," he said. "The Carter estate. The one with the manicured gardens and marble floors." The scandal took a toll, he admitted. "We're downsizing. Starting fresh." He asked if I wanted to buy some of their furniture. I agreed to come by. When I walked into that house again, it felt hollow. Boxes stacked in hallways. Paintings removed from walls. Memories wrapped in bubble wrap. Richard showed me an antique desk in his study. Solid oak. Hand-carved. "Daniel was supposed to inherit this," he said absently. I didn't respond. Then Eleanor entered the room. Her expression softer now. "Olivia," she said gently. "Daniel's upstairs, packing his last things." I froze. I didn't know he'd be here, she continued. Would you be willing to see him? Just once. For a moment, I didn't want to. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. But I saw something in her eyes. Not manipulation. Closure. I nodded. I'll speak to him. And as I climbed those stairs for the last time, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finality. The hallway upstairs felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I wasn't walking toward a future anymore. I knocked once. Soft! The door opened slowly. Daniel Carter stood there, but not the version I almost married. The polish was gone. The effortless confidence. The smirk that used to make rooms orbit around him. He looked thinner, not dramatically, just worn, like the year had sanded him down. Olivia, he said quietly. Not Liv, not baby, not anything possessive. Just my name. I stepped inside his old bedroom. The walls were bare except for faint outlines where framed achievements once hung. His childhood trophies were packed into boxes labeled in Eleanor's neat handwriting. For a moment, we simply stood there. Two strangers who once picked out china patterns together. I didn't know if you'd come up, he said. I almost didn't. A flicker of something crossed his face. Shame, maybe relief. He sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed standing. I heard about your house, he said, and the business expansion. His voice wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't jealous. It sounded small. Congratulations. Thank you. Silence settled again. Not hostile, just heavy. Finally, he exhaled slowly. I've replayed that night 100 times, he said. The message, the group chat, the look on my dad's face. He rubbed his palms together as if trying to warm them. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that it was just talk, that everyone does that. I didn't interrupt. Turns out, he continued, most people don't. There it was. Not deflection. Recognition. He looked up at me, and for the first time since everything fell apart, there was no performance in his eyes. I was scared, he said again. But this time it wasn't an excuse. It was an admission. You were building something real, something solid, and I didn't know if I deserved it or if I could measure up. So you planned an exit, I said quietly. He nodded. Yes. The honesty landed differently than before. I didn't think you'd ever see it, he added. I thought I'd manage it quietly, slowly. That word, manage, like I had been a project, a timeline. I felt the old sting rise, then dissolve. I wasn't a stepping stone, Daniel, I said. I was offering partnership. I know, he whispered. His voice broke on the last word. I know. We stood there again, the air thick with everything that had once almost been. I lost more than the wedding, he said after a moment. I lost my parents' trust, my reputation, you. He swallowed hard, and I deserved it. It was the first time he'd said something without qualification, without defense, just ownership. I'm sorry, he said. No added explanation. No blaming Sophie. No blaming pressure. Just 2 words, and they were finally clean. I studied him carefully, not to evaluate if I believed him, but to understand if I still felt anything. There was no longing, no bitterness, no urge to wound him back, just a quiet sadness for what we could have been, and relief for what we weren't. I know, I said, and I meant it. That was all. No dramatic speech, no final accusation, just acknowledgement. He nodded slowly as if that was more than he expected. I hope you're happy, he said. I am, and that answer surprised even me, because happiness didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived with stability, with ownership, with peace. I turned toward the door. Goodbye, Daniel. Goodbye, Olivia. His voice didn't chase me down the hallway. It didn't ask for one more chance. It let me leave. Downstairs, Eleanor looked up the moment I reached the bottom step. Her eyes searched my face. I offered her a small, steady smile. It's done, I said. She nodded, swallowing emotion. Thank you, she whispered. Richard walked me to the door. Before I stepped outside, he paused. You deserve better, he said. Yes, I replied gently. I did. And then I left that house for the last time. It's been a year now. I'm sitting in the living room of the house I bought with my own money. Sunlight filters through wide windows onto hardwood floors I installed myself. In the backyard, there is a workshop filled with half-finished tables and the scent of fresh-cut oak. My business is thriving. Not flashy, not dramatic, just solid, stable, real. Richard and Eleanor send a holiday card every year. Daniel's name is no longer signed beneath theirs. I don't know where his life will lead. I don't need to, because the night I sent that email, I didn't destroy my future. I protected it. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It isn't spray paint or public scandal. It's walking away clean and building something no one can plan to leave.